I've never been one. Okay. Thank you so much for coming. Today we have Maddy Vasquez speaking to us first, and then Sarah Orkson will go second. But just a quick bio about Maddy, if you don't know her super well, is that Maddy holds a bachelor's degree in biology with minors in natural resource management and chemistry from Bellevue University. Her experience includes work on plant biodiversity and native grasslands, algae, and plant DNA research. Her research passion centers on understanding how humans connect with the natural world. Maddy is driven by the question of how managers can inspire people to appreciate and contribute to conservation efforts, emphasizing the human role in sustaining natural ecosystems. And today, she is going to be speaking to us about exploring the impact of first-time hunters on satisfaction with Tier 2 duck hunting regulations. Oh, take it away.
Thank you. Just so everyone knows, I am going to be presenting this at the Wildlife Society meeting next week. So this is kind of like sort of like practice round. So I'm open to any sort of feedback at the end, etc. So, all right. So first things first, I have some acknowledgements. First off, first off to my co-advisors, Chris and Mark, the amazing people at Nebraska Game and Parks, John McKinney, and then the amazing people at South Dakota Game and Parks, Rocco Morano, Corey Huxall, and then obviously my lab members, who I would be nowhere without. So, duck hunting is a long-standing tradition here in North America, whose participation directly contributes to conservation funding. But since the 1970s, we have seen a decline in hunting participation. And Nebraska and South Dakota are no strangers to this. As you can see from the graph, since the 90s, we've seen a 52% decline in hunters, which is around 450 to like 550 hunters lost per year, which is not good. So the North America Waterfowl Management Plan is an agreement between Canada, the United States, and Mexico to sort of with the goal in mind to conserve waterfowl. Also referred to as NAMWAP. So in the 2012 NAMWAP update, a sort of idea was posed about a three-legged stool that is upholding waterfowl conservation. The first two stools being obviously waterfowl populations and waterfowl habitats, but that third leg of the stool was named hunters and human dimensions. So the ability to identify waterfowl on the wing has been identified as a potential barrier to participation, which directly impacts our three efforts, which is recruitment, retention, and reactivation of hunters. So in the 2018 NAMWAP update, a sort of idea was thrown around of, can we increase participation through a simplified waterfowl regulation option, which is exactly what Nebraska and South Dakota sought to answer. With their two-tier duck hunting system. So basically how this works, there's two tiers. Tier 1 being your more traditional duck hunting experience with that 6 ducks a day bag limit, but still with the sex and species specific restrictions. Now Tier 2 is the newer tier, which is the 3 ducks a day bag limit, but with no sex or species specific restrictions. So we are effectively removing that identification barrier that we identified previously. So when a duck hunter goes to register for HIP, the Harvest Information Program, which is mandatory for all duck hunters before participating, they choose the tier that they want to participate in for the entire season, and then they remain in that season throughout. So the two-tier system was approved by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for the 2021-2022 duck hunting season, with the plan to extend it for 4 seasons. We just wrapped up our 4th season the beginning of this year. But we were approved for a 5th season, which is going to be coming up at the end of this year. So there's a couple things we were required to get from our Tier 2 hunters. The first 2 being parts collection surveys and diary data. Obviously, this regulation was made in the mindset for hunters to help hunters. We want to make sure that it's not directly impacting our waterfowl populations. So having hunters send in wings and tell us where they're hunting, what they're hunting, and how many they've shot can really help us gauge how this regulation is impacting our waterfowl populations. It's not affecting our waterfowl populations, just in case anyone was curious. And then the post-season survey and phone interviews really gets us a holistic measure of how well this regulation is working for the people that are using it. So today I'm really going to be focusing on understanding how first-time hunters experience these regulations and how crucial it is for improving our participation and ensuring the success of wildlife management programs. So the question we're asking here is, was there a difference between first-time hunter satisfaction with Tier 2 than people who have hunted before? Tier 2 was made in the mindset for people who are younger and less experienced with their waterfowl ID. So most likely first-year hunters are falling into that category. So we want to see if the regulation that was made for them is if they have more satisfaction than other people that are using it. So how we did this is we collected survey data from our Tier 2 participants. We asked hunters things like about their prior hunting experience, their satisfaction with the regulation, and their perceived ability to identify different species of ducks. Today, I'm going to be focusing on responses to a set of questions about their specific satisfaction levels with the Tier 2 regulation. And also specifically, I'm looking at just Year 3 survey data. Year 4 survey data, the survey just went out at the beginning of this month, so we should be collecting data in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully we're going to get that analysis out in the next couple of months. So again, this stuff is just Year 3. So around 3,500 hunters were asked to participate in Nebraska, with 655 of them completing it, which gives it a response rate of 19%. South Dakota, a little over 2,000 people were invited to participate, with 450 people completing it, which gives you a response rate of 22%. But overall, our Tier 2 survey, we had a 20% response rate, which is really great. So this is the question that I'm specifically looking at right now. After having participated in Tier 2, how satisfied or unsatisfied were you with each of the following? So the information provided to make the decision to choose Tier 1 or Tier 2, we want to make sure that we have effective communication with what each tier means and what it means to choose each tier. Ease of enrollment is pretty self-explanatory. We want to make sure that Tier 2 has an easy and streamlined experience when registering for it. Being able to shoot up 3 ducks per day is super important. We reduced the bag limit by half for this new regulation, and we want to make sure that is still working and satisfying for the hunters. Then the requirement of reporting harvest through the diary and the requirement of sending in wings is a mandatory thing that they have to do, and we want to see if that mandatory requirement is affecting satisfaction at all with this regulation. And obviously your overall experience using the Tier 2 regulation gives us a really great holistic measure of how well the regulation is working for the people that are using it. So we used R for our data analysis. I ran ordinal regression models to assess satisfaction differences and then conducted chi-square tests to measure significance. The key comparison we're making here is first-time hunters versus experienced hunters. So how did we do? So the first couple graphs you're going to be seeing, there isn't a significant difference between experienced hunters and first-time hunters, but that's not necessarily the important part of these graphs. What matters is that these group of hunters, first-year and experienced hunters, where they're falling on that satisfaction scale. So I'm going to walk you through the graph real fast. Your y-axis, you have the probability of responses based off if you're a first-year hunter or an experienced hunter. Your x-axis, you have the satisfaction scale, varying from very dissatisfied to very satisfied. Blue being your first-year hunters, and brown being your experienced hunters, and then the black bars being your confidence intervals. So as we can see here, though there's not a difference between the two, most of our hunters are falling on the more satisfied end of the scale. This means we're communicating effectively, which is really, really important. Same exact thing applies here. Yes, there is not a difference, but as you can see, majority of hunters are falling in that very satisfied, somewhat satisfied range with ease of enrollment. So it is easy to enroll in Tier 2, which is really great. Being able to shoot up to 3 ducks per day, I was really looking forward to this one as, yes, first-year hunters are satisfied with it. That's to be expected. They don't really know any better. But these experienced hunters who have hunted before also are satisfied with the 3 ducks a day bag limit. So that's really great as well. The requirement to report harvest through the diary, again, what's important here is that hunters are satisfied with this requirement. So some of the mandatory things aren't impacting satisfaction rates. So this is the first one. We are going to see that there is a statistical difference between the two, with first-year hunters more likely to be satisfied with the requirement of sending in wings of harvested birds. And while the analysis shows a statistically significant difference between the two groups, the effect size is pretty small, which just means that although there is a measurable difference between the two, it is unlikely to result in a meaningful or noticeable impact for management decisions in practice. Give me 1 second. Oh, there it is. There's a lot of things going on the screen. Okay. And then your overall experience using tier 2, again, you're going to see this difference with first year hunters more likely to be satisfied. But again, it's not noticeable enough of a difference where a manager would be inclined to either adapt or change anything with this. So the big key takeaways here is that the majority of hunters are satisfied with tier 2, which is a big question that we've been asking. And yes, first year hunters are more likely to be satisfied with requirements and overall satisfaction rates. But as we discussed before, it's not a super big effect size. So there's not a super meaningful difference between first year and experienced hunters, which is also a really great thing. So again, like I said previously, this was made for these newer, less experienced hunters. So it's really great that we're seeing that they are satisfied. But what's also really great is that there are experienced hunters who are either coming back or have hunted before and are coming into this tier 2 program. They're also really satisfied. So given that, based on the survey results, we do not see any evidence for a change in how this regulation is set up, which is super important given that there is a growing conversation about expanding this regulation to different states and maybe even other flyways. So then I thought I'd take the time and kind of get into more so of what my thesis is, some more of what my thesis focuses on. Satisfaction is a huge part of that. But I thought I'd jump into some other exciting stuff that I will be hopefully discovering. So another big part of what I'm going to be looking at is who is participating in each tier, focusing on demographics, age, experience, motivations. Why are they choosing the tier that they are? And are they choosing the tier for quote unquote correct reasons? So as I said a bunch of times, this is designed for younger, inexperienced hunters in mind. But through some interviews and some surveys, we've actually seen a rise in older hunters who have eyesight difficulties due to age or other things, are actually coming back to hunting because this regulation allows them to enjoy hunting without the fear of not following regulations. So that's really cool. And those little tidbits of knowledge, I'm hoping that we find other really cool gems through the interviews and surveys. And then factors influencing continued participate and support the satisfaction stuff that I just talked about are super, really deals into this. So registration accessibility, outreach and awareness, how well are we reaching new people? Recruitment is a huge thing that all waterfowl managers are trying to find out right now. So take me, for example, I'm an outdoorsy person, but I never thought of hunting as something that I'd really be interested in. And before coming and doing this project, I didn't even know about tier 2. And I ended up really, really enjoying it. So are we finding these people who have the potential to be hunters, and how well are we finding them? And then satisfaction with the regulation, and then how do all of these influence hunters' desire to continuing using tier 2? And then duck identification and educational resources. So education is a deeply woven theme into the tier 2. So how are these tier 2 hunters learning to identify ducks? And is duck identification even important to them? In the past that we've seen, waterfowl hunters' identity is directly correlated with can I identify ducks? So it's going to be interesting to see if these newer hunters who don't necessarily have to be a waterfowl hunter, do they find it equally important? And are we seeing a shift in identity in the waterfowl hunting world? And if so, are there additional or improved resources needed to support their goals of being better at waterfowl identification? So what can managers provide to better support hunters? What's that next step look like? Do we need an app, videos, in-person trainings, mentorship programs, stuff like that? And with that, thank you. I'm happy to take any questions about my thesis or even about the satisfaction stuff that I presented earlier. Thank you.
We have a lot of time for questions or comments, and then Maddie, if you get a question, if you can just repeat it so people on Zoom can hear it.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah.
How do you send a duck wing for the mail?
We send you a little envelope, which I had on the slide. It's like a little manila envelope. And it has like a thing on it, and you put the duck wings inside and you say what you all got, and then you send it in the mail, and then we get it. And then my research partner is at the wing bee right now, and we take all of these envelopes, we open them, we identify them all, and then put them in the database.
You might have said this, but when did the tier 2 start? What year?
2021, 2022.
Okay.
That season.
Okay. And then year 3 then is 2020 or 2023.
2021, 22, 24, 20. I think so.
Okay.
Right there.
Okay.
Because right now it's 2024, 25.
Got it,
So it should
okay.
be 23, 24.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I was curious about what the reason for the implementation of tier 2 is, like why design it that way? Because at the beginning, did you say that duck hunting is kind of decreasing?
Yep.
Okay, so like, yeah, like why, I guess, like lower that cap through tier 2? If like overall hunting is decreasing.
Yeah, so participating in hunting is decreasing, especially in waterfowl. You can go, it's deemed as like a little bit harder because you have to be able to identify the sex of a bird and the species of a bird before shooting it, given like there's certain regulations, like you can only shoot 3 mallard hens per day. So you can't go over that in the 6 bag limit. So if we have tier 2 and you don't have to do any of that, you just get to shoot 3 birds, 3 ducks. In any way, like you don't have to worry about any of those regulations. So someone like me who has never identified a duck before in my life, who wants to like hunt, I can go out and I can participate without having that like huge barrier of like, oh, I don't know how to identify ducks, so I shouldn't be able to do this. So we're hoping that like because it's newer and a little bit easier, more people will be inclined to come.
Okay, yeah, got it.
It will be interesting to see like the demographics and see like if a lot of the people sign up for tier 2 are younger. Because I'm wondering if like the older generation like was doing this tier 1 duck hunting, but now they're like getting older, their eyesight's bad as you mentioned,
Yeah.
so they're not like sign up for that. And maybe they'll go and sign up for tier 2, and it'll be younger people that can learn than to
Yes.
sign up for tier 1.
Exactly.
That'll be interesting, super interesting. Yeah,
I'm very excited.
thanks. Cool.
Someone says, great presentation. Did you do any intervention for the hunters to be satisfied with tier 2 instead of tier 1? Would you show the status of hunters? Are these experienced hunters or new hunters? I think what you're getting at is something that me and then my research partner Ava, she's also doing tier 2 stuff, just on like a different scale. She's going to be looking at graduation rates and between tier 1, like our tier 2 hunters graduating to tier 1. I think that answers that question. I'm not sure. If it doesn't, let me know.
Is the reason for the decrease in waterfowl hunters because of difficulty, or is that just something that you guys hypothesized was the reason?
So through other surveys being done, the inability, there's a whole bunch of reasons why hunting in general is declining. Access to public land, especially in Nebraska, is like super low. But the inability to identify has been identified through survey work as a potential, as a barrier.
Do other states have similar programs, and if so, what are their successes with that?
South Dakota and Nebraska are the only ones that are sort of like playing with these experimental regulations. And from what I can tell right now, it's a big like watch party. Everyone's sort of like looking at this, seeing how it works, seeing if it works. And now with some of our survey data, we are seeing again satisfaction rates being high, and the effect on waterfowl population being so low. U.S. Fish and Wildlife is getting on board with the thought of expanding it in the Central Flyway. So we're the only ones who are having this sort of like resurgence in our R3, which is really cool.
What was like the threshold or like the criteria of being experienced versus new?
If you've hunted like 2 years. So like how So a new hunter has never hunted before, an experienced hunter has hunted for at least one season. So it could be their second season, it could be their 50th.
You mentioned that like in your future directions, you want to see if there's a need for like maybe like classes or apps. Does Nebraska have any programs currently that like helps hunters with waterfowl ID or?
Delta Waterfowl and Ducks Unlimited have a lot of really great resources, and I do think Nebraska Game and Parks also has like a pamphlet that's very old. It's not really great in terms of like picture quality from what I'm told. So there's not a lot of great things out there, except Delta DU do have some really great stuff, but we want to see if it's gonna improve.
This is gonna be probably a bit of a loaded question, but so you said if they've hunted at least 2 seasons, yeah. So what if within that season I only went out 1 time each?
Mhm.
Would you still consider that experience? How do you think that biases your data? Because I feel like 1 time is not, like 1 time per season is not that experienced.
So this is kind of getting into the future directions of this. We are going to dive into our experienced hunters because we do have questions of how many times did you go out? How many birds did you shoot? And then if you look at hit data, you can see what they are, like we can actually see those real statistics, but that's gonna take like a deep dive into the data in the database. But that's like something that's really like on the super important question, and I'm going to answer that.
What would you say is experienced?
I probably at least like I would say I've hunted I think twice. I would not consider myself experienced in like a season, but I feel like at least a year or 2 of like not consistently going out, but like going out like at least a couple times where you like, you know what, like you feel comfortable with the shotgun, you feel comfortable with like how to hunt and stuff, I would say. That's like a personal thing.
Are you taking number of harvests within that experience sort of thing? Because if I go out 3 times, I don't shoot anything, still, like,
Yep.
Just out of curiosity. Yeah.
I feel like the experience of duck hunting, as long as in terms of like your satisfaction, just seeing ducks is like super important. So yes, I don't have experience in shooting ducks, but I know how to find a spot, where to go, what I'm looking for kind of thing. So even if I didn't shoot any ducks this season, but I went out a few more times, I would consider myself a more experienced duck hunter.
I guess getting in that, like, on your survey, do you just have a question that asks them how experienced do they view themselves? And then you could correlate that to how many times they've maybe gone out that season or in past seasons, and then
We do, the only like self-perception sort of like identity question we have is, do you think identifying waterfowl is like identifies you as a duck hunter? I think for the experience level, we're just taking it off of how many seasons have you hunted and then how many ducks have you shot.
What's the part of your project that you're most excited about?
Definitely the education stuff. I'm really looking forward to it. Jenny Dower is like the person that I'm like sort of working with, and I'm really excited to see like what we can like potentially create with this. There is talks of like creating a new application, maybe partnering with Plat-Based and time lapse for some like video stuff on ducks to get out there for hunters. So I think it's going to be really cool to see if we can identify that need and then make it happen. So.
Time for one more question. Cool. Thanks. I want to grab another piece of pizza or something, just switch things over there. So, yeah. Well, that's.
What about bolts and how do you play?
The legal loopholes, we have seen that some of our tier 2 hunters' motivations to hunt have not necessarily been for the right reasons. But there's so few of them that it's not really direct impact on population, so we're not.
Question, I wasn't sure